the Spartans, warriors forged in the crucible of discipline and war. Their name echoes through history as the ultimate soldiers. But what if I told you that the very system that made them so formidable also sealed their fate? That their society was a ticking time bomb, destined to fail from its very inception? Let's journey back to ancient Greece and uncover why the mighty Spartan society was doomed from the start. Sparta wasn't built on philosophical debates or artistic pursuits like its rival Athens. It was built on one thing: total control. Specifically, control over a vast population of enslaved people known as the Helots. The Helots were not captured from foreign lands. They were fellow Greeks, conquered people from the lands of Messenia and Laconia. They outnumbered the Spartan citizens by a staggering amount, perhaps as much as 7-1. This created a constant, deep-seated fear within the Spartan elite. The fear of a massive Helot uprising was the single most important driver of their entire culture, their laws, and their way of life. Everything the Spartans did, from their brutal training to their secretive police, was designed to keep the Helots in a state of terror and submission. This foundation of fear and oppression was the first major crack in their society's structure. The life of a Spartan began with a judgment. Newborn infants were inspected by the Gerousia, the Council of Elders. If a baby was deemed weak, sickly, or imperfect in any way, it was left to perish on Mount Agathos. There was no room for perceived weakness in the Spartan state. This practice, known as infant exposure, was a brutal form of eugenics. It was the first step in a system designed to create a population of perfect soldiers. For the boys who survived this initial test, life would be a relentless series of trials. At the tender age of 7, they were taken from their families and entered into the agoge. The agoge was the legendary Spartan education and training program. But it wasn't about reading or mathematics. It was a 13-year-long boot camp designed to strip away individuality and forge a soldier. Boys were kept deliberately underfed, encouraging them to steal food. If caught, they weren't punished for stealing, but for the clumsiness of getting caught. This taught them stealth, cunning, and resourcefulness. They lived in barracks, subjected to harsh discipline and constant physical training. They learned to endure pain, cold, and hunger without complaint. The system was designed to create absolute loyalty to the group and the state above all else. This brutal upbringing created the finest soldiers in the ancient world, but it came at a terrible cost. It stifled innovation, critical thinking, and any form of personal expression that didn't serve the military. A society that focuses only on creating soldiers forgets how to create anything else. While Athens was producing philosophers, playwrights, and artists, Sparta was only producing hoplites. One of the most chilling aspects of Spartan control was the Crypteia. This was a secretive institution, a kind of secret police. Comprised of the most promising young men from the agoge, at certain times of the year, members of the Crypteia were sent out into the countryside with nothing but a dagger. Their mission was to terrorize and murder Helots, especially those who showed any signs of leadership or defiance. This was state-sanctioned murder, designed to cull the Helot population and eliminate any potential rebels before they could organize. It was a horrifying, yet integral part of maintaining Spartan dominance. This practice ingrained a deep cruelty into the hearts of the Spartan youth. It normalized violence and taught them that the life of a Helot was worthless. A society built on such systematic brutality is morally bankrupt and ultimately unstable. While we often focus on the men, Spartan women were also unique in the ancient Greek world. They were known for their independence, education, and physical fitness. Unlike their Athenian counterparts who were confined to the home, Spartan women were expected to be strong. They received a formal education and participated in athletic competitions. The reason for this was purely practical. The state needed strong women to produce strong sons, the future soldiers of Sparta. A healthy mother was more likely to give birth to a healthy infant who would survive the initial inspection. Furthermore, with the men constantly away at war or in training, the women were responsible for managing the households and estates. This gave them a level of economic power and freedom unheard of elsewhere in Greece. However, their primary role was still defined by the state, to be mothers of warriors. Their value was intrinsically tied to their reproductive capacity and their ability to instill Spartan values in their children. One of the most critical factors in Sparta's eventual decline was its demographic collapse. The Spartan system was so exclusive and demanding that the number of full Spartan citizens, the Spartiates, was constantly shrinking. To be a citizen, one had to be born of 2 Spartan parents, complete the agoge, and possess a certain amount of land, a kleros, to support his family and contribute to the communal meals. If a Spartan lost his land, he lost his citizenship. This created a system where wealth became increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few families. Furthermore, the constant warfare, the practice of infant exposure, and a low birth rate meant that the number of Spartiates was always on a downward trend. There simply weren't enough Spartans being born to replace those who died in battle or lost their status. By the time of the Battle of Leuctra, in 371 BC, a pivotal defeat for Sparta, the number of full Spartan citizens may have dwindled to fewer than 2,000. This is a shockingly small number to control a vast territory and a huge Helot population. This demographic crisis was a direct result of their own rigid social structure. Their obsession with purity and exclusivity meant they were unwilling to expand their citizen body by including others. Sparta's entire existence was focused inward, on controlling the Helots and perfecting their military machine. This made them incredibly conservative and resistant to change. They distrusted outsiders and new ideas. They avoided trade and commerce, even using cumbersome iron rods as currency to discourage the accumulation of wealth and interaction with other Greek city-states. This isolationism made them powerful in the short term, but vulnerable in the long term. While other states like Thebes and Athens were developing new military tactics and political systems, Sparta remained stuck in its old ways. Their military tactics, centered on the phalanx of heavily armed hoplites, had been dominant for centuries. But they became predictable. When the Theban general Epaminondas introduced innovative tactics at the Battle of Leuctra, the supposedly invincible Spartan army was shattered. Sparta's inability to adapt, a direct consequence of its rigid social and political system, was its ultimate undoing. Their world was changing, but they refused to change with it. So, the very pillars of Spartan society were the architects of its downfall. Their reliance on a vast enslaved population created a state of perpetual internal fear. Their brutal educational system, the agoge, created superior soldiers, but crushed innovation and individuality. It created a society incapable of anything but war. Their strict, eugenic, and exclusive citizenship laws led to a demographic death spiral from which they could never recover. A society that cannot replenish its people is doomed. Finally, their deep conservatism and isolationism left them unable to adapt to a changing world. They were a relic, a fearsome one, but a relic nonetheless. The story of Sparta is a powerful lesson. It shows that military might alone cannot sustain a society. Without justice, without adaptability, and without a basic respect for human life, even the strongest walls will eventually crumble from within. For more fascinating stories from the past, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, Historical Repo.